Now, Australia has some pretty awesome products. Tim Tams, for example, the Great Barrier Reef, Margot Robbie, excessive swearing. But up until this point, I've never known much about Australian developed video games, which is pretty surprising given I've been immersed in all different kinds of games since the 1990s. I wanted to educate myself a little bit while also helping to cast a spotlight on some Australian-made games that are old, current, and even some ones that are coming soon. Some of these you may already be familiar with, and others might have passed you by, like they have me. But the point is, they were all made here in Oz, and I hope they tickle you enough to maybe get some of your attention. Now, these aren't meant to be reviews at all, more of like a window shop of what Australia has produced up until now and what we're currently producing game-wise. And some of these are going to be my first impressions of the games as well. The game I'm looking at today is actually developed in my hometown of Brisbane in Queensland, right in my neck of the woods. Satellite Rain from Australian developer 5 Live Studio in 2015 is an isometric real-time class-based strategy game, following pretty heavily in the footsteps of Bullfrog Studios' own game Syndicate and Syndicate Wars. It's set in a cyberpunk dystopian future. I say that like there's a different kind of cyberpunk genre, where corporations hold power over the populace with their immortality technology that only the rich can afford, and a private security force that has taken over from the government policing agencies. You play as a crew of 4 rebels trying to fight and expose the evils of this company, Dracogenics Corporation. The first thing that struck me about this game were the visuals. Dark, rain-soaked streets framed with lashings of fog that sort of shift and distort the bright neon below. How gorgeous is this game? When I heard Cyberpunk 2077 was a bit of a buggy disappointment, I had been looking for something with a similar aesthetic to scratch that cyberpunk itch that I had. I tried games like The Ascent and Cloudpunk, and they were good, but I found Ascent gameplay a little repetitive early on, and Cloudpunk was more focused on telling a pretty cool story than it was interested in developing or delivering gameplay. They didn't quite gel with me, and I'm not bagging either of them, they're both really cool games, but at the time, neither was what I was really craving. Sat Rain, on the other hand, has suited me right down to the ground. You play in this open world where there are several missions to complete in the city, in any order that you wish, provided of course that your agents have the skill set to execute the plan that you've got. Every mission appears to offer a few different ways of completing them. You can go in silent with minimal agents, avoiding the security forces, grabbing the target, and exfiltrating before anyone knows you were even there. Or you can assassinate anything in your path and cover your tracks with your hacker. And if any of that fails, or if in general you just prefer brute force, you can knock on the front door, unholster your assault rifles, and laser blast them in their stupid faces. The kind of missions I've come across so far are things like hack into the city camera system to slow down facial recognition softwares, break into the bank for funds that allow us to bribe security personnel and officials for access to varying places, as well as things like stealing prototypes from droid factories to improve your kit. I haven't gotten far enough yet for some of the customization of the agents, but you can hijack civilians on the street when you spot that their genetics are advantageous, like high-level regeneration. It's kind of hacking their cyber brains and then remote piloting them to come back to your clone factory to sample their genetics, which sounds pretty suspect. Essentially borrowing their likeness for your agent's consciousness to clone into if they get murdered. There is also augmentation for both your agent's bodies as well as their weapons, which looks to be pretty cool. The soundtrack is sensational. When you're stealthing through a level and a guard suddenly changes his route and locks eyes on one of your agents, the music can get intense. There's no voiceover work for the main 4 characters, although your handler does get some lines in the briefings. I'd say some of the enemy agents' voice work is nothing particularly special, sort of the standard, suspect neutralized sort of stuff. In playing the plot and the missions, I found the UI can be a little bit clunky. Maybe it's something I'll get used to. Some of the action controls feel a little delayed, and I think maybe that's a result of the real-time action rather than being able to pause the action like a lot of these other strategic games. Not really sure why I need to tell my agents to draw their weapons if they're getting fired on. I guess it makes it feel a little more like a roleplay situation maybe. It can be a little bit difficult to know when you're stealthing around what movement will more likely cause you to be seen. The enemy guards and the police have flashlights, but their range is not really representative of their line of sight, and I felt a lack of feedback about whether I was going to be in visual range or not when I moved around. I did find when I stealthed from cover to cover, my character would sort of lean down, and maybe it's just me, but this seemed to drop the number of times I was spotted from those kind of distances. I did also have some trouble knowing what to do after the initial tutorial, and I probably could have used just a little bit more hand-holding to discover a few more secrets of the city before I was let loose on it. But these are pretty minor gripes. It's also worth mentioning that you can play this in single player or multiplayer with up to 3 of your friends. Overall, this is a quality strategy game, and it's sort of in a similar vein to Desperados 3, or Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun. So if you're into those kind of games and you're looking for a cyberpunk spin, I would highly recommend Satellite Reign.